Why does the U.S. Navy have two types of aircraft carriers when operation? Size does matter. I'm not saying bigger is better, but if your trunk is bigger, you'll grow more bush. Additionally, an aircraft carrier is the single largest and heaviest piece of military hardware. Even though legally the U.S. Navy only has 11 aircraft carriers, there are 9 other aircraft carrying ships in the U.S. Navy. Size is one of the elements that determines how seriously we regard an aircraft carrier. They simply go by a different name. They are known as amphibious assault ships, and as you may infer from their name, they differ greatly from conventional supercarriers. But why does the U.S. have two different types of aircraft carriers? Why do those carriers serve different parts of the military? Why do they rarely cooperate? And why does growing a ship's size not increase its volume? Not what you believe. Comparing these two carriers will help. One appears to be larger than the other at first glance. But how much larger is one? And what difference does that make? American supercarriers typically measure 1092 feet in length, compared to 850 feet for amphibious assault ships. When comparing flight deck measurements, that gap might not seem like much, but it reveals a lot about the purpose of each ship. For instance, only aircraft that are capable of vertical takeoff and landing, such as the F-35B, AV-8B Harrier, V-22 Osprey, and other helicopters, are allowed to operate on amphibious assault ships, which use their decks more like a landing pad than a runway. Because of this, these ships are officially referred to as LHD or LHA, which stand for Landing Helicopter Dock or Landing Helicopter Assault, respectively. Since helicopters and carriers do not have the range to maintain continuous airspace dominance, the aviation wing of these ships executes missions to give short-term support to smaller landing craft and ground forces nearby. This is completely at odds with how the U.S. Navy employs its supercarriers. A carrier of the Nimitz or Ford classes resembles a floating airport more than it does a ship. Supercarriers can launch heavier fixed-wing aircraft, such as the F-18 Hornet and E-2 Hawkeye, in addition to the aircraft launched by amphibious assault ships, thanks to the longer deck space. This underlines the long-term character of supercarrier missions by demonstrating the critical roles that these heavier aircraft play in sustaining air superiority, conducting electronic warfare in contested airspaces, and continuously supporting ground forces. But it's not just important to look at these ships' exteriors. Volume. You see, a ship's volume, its most crucial physical characteristic, is directly impacted by its length. Because of how much the volume of supercarriers and LHDs differs, this affects every aspect of their mission. Consider the fact that a ship can navigate the water with greater ease the larger it is. Although it may appear odd, the square-cube law explains why this is the case. In general, as an object's dimensions are increased, its volume always grows considerably more quickly than its surface area. Because of this, increasing a ship's size does not result in doubling its volume. It has increased 8 times. When a ship grows in size, its volume, which affects its displacement or buoyancy, grows more quickly than its surface area, which affects the resistance or friction it encounters in the water. Because of this, even though there is just a 340-foot difference in ship length between the supercarriers and LHD, the supercarriers are far more efficient at traveling through the water, since they experience less surface friction relative to their volume. Larger ships benefit from increased fuel and energy efficiency as a result, but this also implies that the amount of supplies and aviation fuel that the ships can carry will grow exponentially. This greatly lengthens a carrier's and its air wing's mission before ongoing replenishment becomes necessary, considering that there are several bombs, missiles, and other weaponry. For security, combat aircraft's weapons are kept in magazines buried deep within a carrier's hull. The supercarrier can carry around 375,000 cubic feet of munitions due to the volume disparity, but amphibious assault ships can only carry 16,000 cubic feet of ordnance at most. Accordingly, a supercarrier can operate continuously for up to 2 weeks at full strength without the need to replenish its armaments, whereas an amphibious assault ship's fighting capabilities would be exhausted after just 1 week with only 6 planes. Nevertheless, a 3-ship amphibious ready group can function continuously for 15 days without resupply. LHD. The LHD class of carriers can deploy forces both above and below the deck, despite having a far smaller carrying capacity than its bigger sister. This is made possible by its well deck, an internal housing area that, depending on the objective, can hold either 3 hovercraft, 12 mechanized landing craft, or 40 amphibious assault vehicles. Due to this capability and the range of VTOL planes the ships may launch, LHDs are far better suited for rapid response missions with condensed but demanding operational schedules. To support the Tripoli government that is endorsed by the UN, the U.S. carried out airstrikes over Libya in 2016. As part of Operation Odyssey Lighting, the Navy ordered the amphibious assault ship U.S. Wasp to carry out continuous strikes rather than deploying and tying up a full-size supercarrier to support these air operations. This turned out to be a practical option, as it made sense to use a smaller ship for a smaller operation. However, while possessing landing decks and the capacity to launch VTOL aircraft, the LHD class of ships was never meant to function as aircraft carriers. Their main responsibility is to move and support Marine expeditionary units in sufficient numbers to carry out a successful landing and establish a beachhead. The Swiss Army knife of the U.S. military is the Marine Expeditionary Unit. They are quick reaction troops that can handle anything, anywhere, at any time, from keeping an adversary occupied long enough for the U.S. Army or Air Force to deploy and respond, to humanitarian missions following natural disasters. For instance, the first 2 battalions to arrive in Kabul when U.S. soldiers were being withdrawn from Afghanistan were Marines. Due to their inability to conduct long-term operations distant from land, LHDs are better suited to the U.S. Marine Corps' mission than the U.S. Navy's. Because of this, the majority of the approximately 2,700 people on board, even though the ship is administered by the Navy, are Marines, and very few are sailors. As a result, even though the Navy owns the ship, the Marine Corps has extensive experience utilizing it. And all of the ship's pilots are Marines, not sailors. Since supercarriers are known for their floating airports, amphibious assault ships now resemble floating Marine bases more than they did in the past. Extreme carriers. We seldom ever see supercarriers and LHDs on patrol together due to the disparities in design and functionality. A supercarrier never ventures out by itself. It is constantly guarded by a complement of cruisers, destroyers, and a submarine attached for patrol. Warning: major spoiler, the U.S. Navy is retiring its cruisers, which were in charge of maintaining air superiority. So this is the end of our today's video. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative videos.